All right. Good afternoon or good day, wherever you are, everyone. And this is your next tip in our series talking about race. I'm so happy. I'm so very happy to have our own Professor Mary Reed with us as we talk about cross-racial solidarity and allyship in practicum. There's a lot of conversation we have had in the tips number 10, 11, 12 going on. And we're talking about racism, talking about anti-racist work to disrupt, move, and so we can grow. All of us can grow. And so I'm so happy to have you here, Mary. And I want to ask you two questions we're going to really focus on. What advice do you have to our teacher candidates who wish to show solidarity with other racialized groups? What advice do you have for them as they're out there and they want to make sure they're intentional about showing solidarity with other racialized groups?
That's a great question, Andrew, and thank you so much. I'm so glad we have this space to talk about these critical topics for our teacher candidates, and particularly BIPOC candidates who want to show that cross-racial solidarity. So my first bit of advice to BIPOC candidates is that you don't need to feel isolated. I've been there. I've been lonely. I've been, quite often the only Asian educator in an entire school, and it could be a lonely place sometimes. So I encourage you to reach out and join an affinity group, whether it's a virtual group or even here at OISE, we have the BIPOC Future Teachers, we have a Black Student Advisory and Advocacy Group, the Indigenous Education Network, or the Asian Student Alliance. So these affinity spaces are important for you as a racialized teacher candidate. And it's a space where racialized candidates can feel nurtured and a sense of belonging. So that's really important. Take care of yourself. Having said that, it's equally important to understand the value of cross-racial solidarity. We can't dismantle any form of racism unless we stand shoulder to shoulder and fight against all forms of oppression. It's not like, I'm going to do BLM one day and stop Asian hate one day and decolonize the other day. It is something that we've got to do together ongoingly. And to fully understand the root cause of racism, of oppression, of colonization, is to understand white supremacy. Yeah. That is the foundation. So we have systems and institutions where whiteness dominates the control of power and resources. And it could be through intergenerational wealth or social capital, cultural capital. This is what we call unearned privilege or unearned advantages. Like, take a good look at our political system or even our healthcare system or our economic system. Who are the wealthiest people in our nation? It's Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg. It doesn't take much to take a look at those identities. Who are the people in power-making decisions? So equity cannot be achieved until those positions of power represent true diversity. And I'm not talking about tokenism, where you have one Black and one Indigenous person in the group, and that's good enough, and we're done, move forward. I'm talking about BIPOC people in those seats who have an equity framework and have lived experiences of marginalization. Yes. And to those who sit in those powerful positions right now, they need to give space to BIPOC voices. Yes. So we need to constantly critically analyze that imbalance of power, always, whatever institution you're working in, and work hard towards more BIPOC folks gaining that power. Yeah. And let's look at our educational system. We have data from Carl James's work. Yes. He has clearly given evidence that Black students are far more likely to be suspended and expelled. Empirical evidence. Yes. I, as an Asian educator, I need to roll up my sleeves and work side by side with my Black colleagues, with you, Andrew, yes, and unveil these systemic practices that are formed on whiteness, white norms, whiteness as the supreme. Another quick example, when we saw the surge of anti-Asian violence throughout the pandemic, we saw firsthand the mental health of Asian students and educators decline. My mental health decline. Yes. It was eroded. And Andrew, you were there for me through my darkest days during the pandemic. After the Atlanta shootings, that targeted Asian women last March of 2021. Sorry, 2020, I think. You know, being bombarded by media images of Asian people who looked like me, who looked like my parents, my grandparents, and they were being spit on, coughed on, physically assaulted, murdered, told to go back to China. You reached out to me and supported me and helped me through some of my darkest days. You know, I suffered a lot of horrible emotional harm during the midst of the surge in anti-Asian hate. And you yourself have been through that harm.
Yes. Yes.
So you were able to really empathize.
Yes.
That's what cross-racial solidarity is about.
Absolutely.
It's about being united against all forms of oppression, together collaboratively to dismantle this notion that whiteness is the supreme.
I want to jump in right here quickly for our teacher candidates who are, you know, those of you, there, because sometimes our teacher candidates, they would say, whether they're Black, Indigenous, people of color, or they're white, they'll say, but I don't know what to do. And they hear the word disrupt. I've been using the word a lot lately. They hear the word disrupt and immediately they feel like, wow, that's a big task. How am I going to do it? Something you talked about, which I've been talking about a lot, is you can disrupt with your empathy. You disrupt with the love. I heard you said nurture. I heard you said belonging. I heard you said shoulder to shoulder. So I want to say to teacher candidates who are listening to us, disruption is a wide continuum of stuff. And some of the ways you can do that is, I'm going to repeat it. How do you nurture? How do you create spaces of belonging in your classroom? You are there for 4 or 5 weeks, whatever number of weeks. You can make those weeks, the weeks those students remember for years. So the solidarity, standing shoulder to shoulder, reaching out. It's weird sometimes. One of the biggest tip, Mary, is that it's weird that we don't realize empathy and love is powerful work. So teacher candidates, when you are with other teacher candidates and they are racialized and they are talking about certain things, how do you take that story? How do you handle that story? How do you care for each other? That's a big tip I want to leave with you. And as we wrap this up, Mary, we want to wrap this up talking about the same topic, but talking about allyship. Now, moving, taking a little bit away from just the Black, Indigenous, people of color in solidarity, but also our white teacher candidates, our teacher candidates that I'm speaking to you, the ones we love and care for. What advice do you have for them? To say
for allyship,
allyship, for them who want, for you all who want to be allyship, what advice do you have for them? And then I'll close off with my own advice.
Couple of tips. Believe our stories. That's really important. Believe our stories.
Yeah.
When, like I said, when I had some wonderful white colleagues reach out to me last March, and I told them, I'm not well. I'm feeling really down right now. They believed me, right? So that's true allyship. So believe us, believe our experiences. I was triggered. During there was vandalism in a couple of convenience stores in downtown Toronto, and that brought back bad memories because I grew up in a convenience store, and when I was 10 years old, my father's store was vandalized with awful racial slurs. So believe our stories and really make sure that you give us space to heal. So that's one of them. A second one I think is really important is that allyship is earned. Just because you reach out to racialized people and your intentions are positive, you can't self-label yourself as an ally. Mm-hmm. It is earned. I and you and Indigenous people and other people of color give that label of allyship, right? Based on how you interact and your authenticity and your sincerity. So that's really important. And I know you have a lot regarding performativity, beyond hashtags, all of that. I'd love to hear more about what you think.
Two things I'll share, and before we wrap this up, two things I'll share. For me, we have to move from performative allyship performative, when you do it because everybody's doing it. And that came out the other day. Talk about solidarity with Orange T-shirt Day. I said, I did it. I wore my orange T-shirt. I changed my background to orange. But what do I do afterwards? And I can safely, and I use the word safely very intentionally, say I met a group of Indigenous women at a conference maybe 5 years ago, and we have kept in touch. We have kept in contact. We have each other on social media. We have inboxed each other. They have invited me to events, and I was honored to go, not to speak, but just to be a guest. They have invited me in their space. They have asked me, for copies of my book to share, and I'm honored that they asked me for a copy of my book. It's authentic. It's genuine. Spend the quality time, teacher candidates, to build relationships. And the last thing I would say, build relationships. So the relationships is what allow you not to be performative. When you build relationships, they're authentic. They are true. You know me. I know you. When you build relationship with LGBTQ persons, you know them. It's not performative. Like, oh, it's Pride Month, let's show a flag. It's genuine. It's authentic. And the last thing I'll say on this, Mary, the last thing I'll say, that I give you the last word, and this is a learning moment for our teacher candidates. And I want all of you teacher candidates to lead into the video. Mary, lead into the screen. You notice what our leader, Mary, is one of our leaders of the program. And your leader just shared a story about what happened to her. She was open, she was vulnerable. I didn't even know you were going to share that, Mary. Thank you so much. Now, here's one question I'm going to ask you. This is a major tip for you. What do you do with that story? When you meet another Mary, another Andrew, another Peter, another John, whoever you meet, and they open, be vulnerable, and share their stories, how do you handle that story? And I use my hand like this as a cradle, Mary, because I want you to realize that's one of the powerful things we need from white allies and our student candidates. When you listen to Black, Indigenous, people of color, or other minoritized, equity deserving groups share their story, how you handle that story in the curriculum, how you handle that story in a discussion is important, because so many times our stories are handled in deficit. We're looking at a powerful, amazing leader of the MT program, Professor Mary Reed, yet still right now you got so much more that you have never gotten before. Because the first time I'm hearing about your father's story, Mary. How do I handle that? How do I take care of that as a teacher candidate? And that's what I'm going to leave you with. Mary, final word for teacher candidates. Final word.
You validate those stories. You validate those stories. The worst thing that teacher candidates and educators can do is just walk away and you have these micro invalidations. I have been vulnerable and shared many stories like that. And I have had so much support, which makes me feel like people care. So that's important.
Yes, yes.
Those micro invalidations can be it could erode your mental health, your emotional well-being. So first and foremost is validate, believe the stories, and really appreciate that someone showed a vulnerable side, really, and start building those relationships. Start feeling that you have had, sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Teacher candidates, that's okay. We know that, right? It happens, right? Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And feel privileged.
Yes.
That somebody has felt safe enough to be in your presence to share such a vulnerable story. And I share that story because, when I'm with other racialized people, I feel more safe to share stories like that. So you and we share so much.
Yes.
But because you have provided that safe space. So it's important for white teacher candidates and educators to offer that safe, nurturing, safe space so that we all feel like we can belong and show our vulnerable sides.
Thank you so much. Safer spaces, braver conversations.
Yes.
They're going to lead to more inclusive classrooms, safer spaces, braver conversations. They're going to lead to more inclusive classroom. Your students know you care. Thank you so much again, Mary. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, teacher candidates. Continue to realize your responsibility, our responsibility in creating safer space, braver spaces, to stand in solidarity and to make sure we create authentic opportunities to be allies. Thank you so much.